Yeah, so I'm Bryan Rupp, and my business is just Bryan Rupp Photography, so just my name. And I have 9 years of experience as a professional photographer now. The vast majority of my work has been weddings. I've done over like 230 at this point. So yeah, a lot of wedding stuff, and then a lot of portraiture type stuff as well.
Well, my name is VanBergen, and I am a photographer here in Newburgh. My main focus is seniors and model portfolio development. So not so much weddings, not so much babies and families. I sort of specialize down to those two. I've been holding the camera probably for about 10 or 12 years, but as a profession, only 7 or 8.
So my mom was a watercolor artist, so she kind of just raised me, like teaching me all the rules of composition and stuff like that from when I was a little kid. And then in college, I remembered that my parents had an old film camera up and stored in their closet. So I asked them about that and if I could have that. And so they gave that to me, and I just started shooting film for fun with friends. I would go out on weekends and shoot.
I started out using all film camera. It was an old Pentax. It was a 35mm, and they had a series of 4 or 5 different lenses that they the family had given to me. That was right at the onset of the digital camera. That equipment was coming out. It was still out of my price range, so I was at the low end, the little Nikon, sort of basically the point and shoot series cameras. And I would be the annoying uncle in the corner taking pictures of everybody doing things that they didn't want to be doing. And it was shortly after that, when I was at work, actually I had taken some photos down in Newport Bay. I saw the bridge was there, and the fog was rolling in, and there was an old fishing vessel that was coming in, and I snapped a shot of that. And it was just a shot that, you know, you would see a million times on a postcard, but I thought it was neat. And I tried to take my own version of it, and a friend saw it on my computer screen at work and said, "Well, Tim, you should submit that." And I submitted it to the Coin Viewer Photos, and they put it up on the screen, and several of my friends saw it and said, "Wow, Tim, I saw you on TV." And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And it sort of grew from there.
I use 2 Canon 5D Mark IIIs. To me, I like Canon's color a little bit better, and they have a better lens selection. And it's just what I've always used, so all my money is invested into Canon equipment.
I went to Nikon as my camera of choice, basically because it just felt comfortable. The settings and the controls, it made sense to me early on. I have no loyalty other than just it's what I've progressed through at this point. Starting out, I would not invest the money in it, mostly because people that are starting out as a hobbyist or an amateur photographer, they don't need that. Full frame is going to be good for if you want sports photography, you want to reach all the way across a field, you want to work in a dark environment like weddings. But most people don't ever do that. The most an amateur or a hobbyist photographer will do, they might have a 11 by 14 or a 20 by 30 print on the wall. But for the most part, the people that we are, as hobbyists and amateurs, are presenting images to, they will never see the little, the edges of a line the way you and I as a perfectionist would look at it. Spend your money if you want to have a better picture on better lenses. As they say, what goes, better in, better out. So if you have a good lens, like they say, the glass, you will see most significant change and improvement by a better lens. So I don't buy into the notion that a lot of megapixels, because my cell phone has a lot of megapixels, but you need to look at the lens. It's the size of a pinhead. The amount of data going through the little tiny lens on your phone, and a lot of the point and shoot cameras that you find at the supermarkets and at the Fry's and that kind of a location, the store, you can only cram so much data into that little tiny aperture and the lens. You're just creating a big file from a really small image.
Our phones are pretty high megapixel cameras, but the sensor is just tiny in those things. So that's part of how the images aren't as high quality as like a digital SLR. Like if you took an 8 megapixel digital SLR and compared it to my 8 megapixel iPhone, the digital SLR is going to outperform it every time. Partly because of the lens, but partly just because of the sensor size. Megapixels don't matter too much. I mean, I shoot a lot of stuff on medium on my camera quality, so like it's a 21 megapixel camera, but I shoot a lot of it at around 10 megapixels just because you don't really need that big of a file size unless you're doing some type of commercial work where something is maybe getting put on a billboard. So it's not, megapixels don't matter hugely, and the more megapixels you get, the bigger your file sizes, the more your storage you need, the more your computer's slowing down as you're processing. So it just depends on what you're shooting. But I would take a 10 meg, I mean, I would always choose a digital SLR, you know, regardless of megapixel over like a phone. Oh yeah, I think if you're somewhere around like 8 to 10 is kind of the minimum I would probably go.
So I typically have on my body, my camera body at any one time, probably 70 to 80% of my time, I've got my zoom lens, my 70 to 200 zoom lens. Even for doing in studio portrait work, I like it because I don't have to move around as much. Because with the prime, your zoom is your feet. Also, I like the depth of field control that I have in my 70 to 200 lens. It's a 2.8. I could get a full body and then crop in and get a headshot without moving my feet at all. And my image isn't compromised. When you're buying a lens, unfortunately, cost does matter. You can basically look at the price sheet and determine the better lens. The kit lenses that come with the Nikon or Sony or Canon body, they're going to be good for consumer level. And for the most part, if all you're doing is taking snapshots at a party and with friends and just hanging around town, that's all the lens you're ever going to really need. But when you start producing images that you're going to sell, whether it's wall art or it's some commercial project, you're shooting somebody's product that you want to sell, or it's a person or a group of people, you're going to want as good a lens as you can afford. When you think you can afford X amount of lens, I would suggest you try to go up even more, because you will grow into that. You will see an immediate change in image quality.
So I shoot all prime lenses. I don't have any zoom lenses. I sold all of those a few years ago. And the lens I use most often is a 50 millimeter, and it's the 1.2 L series Canon lens. So it's a really nice lens. And then I also have an 85 millimeter, the 1.2L, a 35 millimeter 1.4L, and then a 24 millimeter 1.4L. I mean, I like primes. I'm a lot more inspired by the depth of field I can get out of a prime lens and the sharpness as well. For me, a lot of it too is the intentionality that it puts into a shot. With a zoom lens, it's easy to set up a shot and maybe like take a shot zoomed in and then zoom out and take another shot. Whereas when I'm setting up a shot, I'm going, okay, I want something wide. I'm gonna use my 24 for this. This is how I'm gonna set this up. So it just makes my shots more intentional. I use the 50 more than anything though. Probably 80% of the time I've got the 50. I mean, I have like a routine kind of for weddings since I shoot them so often. So I usually will use the 85 for most of the ceremony. And then like getting candid shots of people just because I can be farther back from people so they're not seeing me as much. I'm probably 90% of the time naturally lit photos. And I just pay attention a lot to the light, and I shoot backlit a lot. I love the look of that, the feel that gives. I just figure that God is a master lighter. He gave us one light source, and I like to use that outside. So I rely on just the sun. I think that the humans typically look better outdoors when they have just a single light source coming in, and I will position that person where the sun, whether it's through the clouds or through the filter of the trees. Every once in a while I'll use a reflector outside, but in studio I will use anywhere from 1 to 3 lights in my studio, and that's all. I mean, I feel pretty comfortable with the 5D Mark III easily going up to like 1000 ISO without thinking about it. So I mean, I always shoot as low as possible. So like if I can, I'm shooting at 50 or 100 ISO, but I won't hesitate to go up to 1000. And then, I mean, once it gets dark and I'm shooting with lights and stuff, I'll go up pretty easily to like 2000 ISO or 3200 ISO, just depending on the situation and what the lighting is like.
ISO rating is something that's changing a lot. When my early camera came out, my first Nikons, I was afraid to go above 800. The images would be just really grainy. And I wasn't savvy enough with software at that point to do, like noise wear, any sort of image correction to clean that up. The last wedding that I shot last weekend, I was at 1600 ISO, and I was surprised. It was in a dark church. A lot of the light was candle light and some filtered stained glass window light. I was surprised it was doing really well at the 1600. If you had asked me to do that 3 or 4 years ago with my older camera, I still wouldn't.
So I have two. I have an iMac, a 27-inch iMac, and then I also have a MacBook Pro. I have just used Mac for a long time now and just have gotten really used to it. And they seem like they're more stable machines. They're also just a lot better looking computers too, So, but they feel like they function really well for what I need.
When my images are shot and I'm back to the studio, most of my editing is done on my iMac. I do it through Photoshop on my iMac.
I use mainly Lightroom, and then I use Photoshop a good bit as well. And then I also use Photo Mechanic for culling the photos, which culling is just narrowing down which ones I'm going to keep and which ones I'm not going to keep. So I'm pulling out any duplicates or anything where, say, a light didn't go off or something, so the photo's just dark, or really unflattering photos of people. So I go through in Photo Mechanic and cull those down, so I'm just getting the ones that I want to edit. And then I pull those into Lightroom. And then I take my favorite, like on a wedding, my favorite about 50 to 100 into Photoshop to do an additional round of editing on them.
I shoot a lot of frames. When I'm doing a senior portrait session, I may come home with 300, 400. I see a lot of subtleties in a person's emotion, a person's shift in his or her eyes, and that moment of just wander and wonder without a person even changing their body position will sell an image completely different. So I will be shooting a lot of frames. My camera's just clicking. When I do typically a model session, when we have 4 or 5 different clothing changes, I will have between 12 and 1500 frames that I've shot.
So I take probably like 300 to 500, depending how long the session is. That's like a 2-hour session. I keep probably like 70 to 150 of those photos. I basically go through that same like culling process of pulling out anything that's duplicate, anything that's really unflattering, and then deliver the finals to them. Yeah, I shoot in RAW. I mean, for a professional photographer, like the weight is pretty high on you as far as you're needing to produce a product for someone. And I mean, it depends on what you're shooting. Like things like weddings are so fast paced and you're in so many different situations so quickly that there's not time to say, adjust the white balance for every different situation so that it's dialed in perfectly. So having the control in post to go in and adjust the white balance after the fact is hugely beneficial.
I like to have a UV filter on my lens, basically this as a level of insurance for keeping the front of my real lens clean all the time. I can buy a $12 filter, throw the other one away if it gets scratched or some dust on it. I can throw away the filter, but my $1,500 lens is still in great shape. I also would recommend a circular polarizer lens, which is great on a super bright day. It'll take off some of those anomalies and it'll sort of balance out your light levels and colors a bit better. I actually have had more difficulty shooting in winter when you're not preparing for the cold outside. When you have your camera gear, you forget it and leave it in the car and it's been cold all night, you bring it inside, instantly your glass is all fogged up. And sometimes that could take a half an hour, could take 5 or 10 minutes, and that messes things up.
So I just have a big roller bag, and it's the largest size you can have that'll still fit in an overhead compartment on an airplane. And it's an actual camera bag made by Lowepro. So I mean, it has little slots, where everything fits in, and they're like Velcro things so that you can adjust each like section to hold whatever you want. So I typically carry everything in that, and then I have to strap any like light stands to the outside of that. So even when I travel, a lot of times I'll just take a backpack, as long as I can fit everything I need into that backpack. And I have a backpack I love that holds enough gear to do that. I think the key to it all is developing your vision. Like technical skills and things like that are important to a certain extent, but I think the people that are really successful and are really succeeding and are also really happy in their work are the people that have a vision, and they know what they're going for in their photos, and they're creating that look that they really like. And that's something that's unique to each person.
One thing I wish I knew when I'd started is how much time I'm going to be investing in this. I didn't expect it really to become a passion. I thought it was going to be just a hobby, something that I would do every once in a while. At the same time, I was doing photography, that the kids were young, and I would have a fishing pole in my car, and I thought that would be fun. I'd get off of work, and sometimes I'd go fish. Sometimes I'd grab the camera. I didn't realize that the camera and what a simple photograph means to people, the impact that has on people's lives. And when I see that sparkle in their eye and they say, holy smokes, that's me, that's exciting for me, to see people's lives change from a piece of paper in their hand. That's pretty neat.